Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world of clouds and lightning, where gossip crackles like thunder and the gods never quite behave themselves. Imagine the cool marble floors of Olympus under your bare feet, the whisper of wind carrying the scent of ambrosia and burnt offerings, and the looming presence of Zeus himself, king of the gods, king of questionable decisions. You're standing there, trying not to look directly at him as he scans the horizon for his next adventure in charm. If history tells us anything, it's that you probably wouldn't survive this place for more than an afternoon unless you enjoy dodging divine tantrums and accidental lightning strikes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing if someone in Norway is about to fall asleep at 2 a.m. or if someone in Australia is just sipping morning coffee while I ramble about jealous goddesses. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander through the shimmering halls of Olympus, and the air hums with divine energy. The gods are lounging on their impossibly ornate chairs, sipping golden nectar and pretending not to notice Zeus as he flirts shamelessly with yet another nymph. It's a running joke among the immortals. Zeus can't resist meddling with mortals or lesser divinities, as if the sky and the earth and all their responsibilities aren't enough to keep him busy. Historians still argue whether Zeus's dalliances were symbolic of natural forces or just a reflection of ancient storytelling gone wild, but one thing is certain: his wandering eyes caused plenty of divine drama. You notice Hera sitting a little apart from the crowd, her regal face like a perfectly polished mask. She doesn't need to say a word for everyone to know she's keeping score. Hera, queen of the gods, protector of marriage, and ironically married to the most unfaithful husband in all of mythology. She's the kind of goddess who can command silence with a single glance, the kind that would make you question every life choice if she so much as raised an eyebrow in your direction. Zeus laughs too loudly at something the nymph Io just said. Io is lovely, of course, all nymphs are. They tend to shimmer like sunlight dancing on water, with a kind of effortless beauty that would make even modern supermodels look like they need a nap. You watch as Zeus leans closer to her, his massive frame casting a shadow that looks both protective and predatory. There's a strange tension in the room, like that moment when someone brings up politics at a family dinner and everyone freezes, waiting to see who will throw the first verbal punch. The thing is, Io isn't flirting. She's actually a priestess of Hera, which makes this entire scene about 10 times worse. Imagine being the handmaiden of a queen and accidentally catching the eye of her notoriously unfaithful husband. It's like working as a secretary for someone's spouse and having the boss send you winking emojis at midnight. Not good. Not good at all. The sky outside Olympus flickers with distant lightning, and you can almost hear the ancient Greeks telling these tales around their hearths, shaking their heads at Zeus's antics. Some scholars still debate whether these myths were metaphors for the unpredictable nature of storms, or just early soap operas dressed up in divine clothing. Either way, you can feel the crackle of tension building, like a summer storm that hasn't yet broken. Zeus, in his infinite wisdom, and by infinite, I mean tragically lacking, doesn't seem to notice Hera's tightening jaw or the faint glow of anger around her. You suspect he's thinking of excuses already. Something about attending an important meeting with Poseidon maybe, or needing to check on the weather patterns in Thessaly. But Hera is no fool. If anything, she's the one person who knows exactly when Zeus is lying, which, let's face it, is most of the time. For now, though, you just sit back and take it all in. The polished marble reflects the glow of eternal torches, the air smells faintly of rain and myrrh, and the gods continue their eternal dance of jealousy, desire, and petty revenge. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the soft clinking of golden goblets and the murmured laughter of immortals, who know exactly how this story will end badly, for someone. You follow the thread of the story, drifting away from the polished grandeur of Olympus to a quieter corner of the ancient world, where the nymph Io begins her day without the faintest idea of the divine storm brewing over her head. Io is a priestess devoted to Hera, and you can almost see her standing by a small temple, sunlight streaming down like golden ribbons across her hair. The scent of olive trees and freshly crushed flowers lingers in the warm air. It's peaceful here, far removed from the high drama of Zeus's thundering halls, at least for now. Io's life is simple. or as simple as it can be, when your job is to honor a goddess known for her sharp memory and even sharper temper. You watch her gather water from a spring, the jug balanced gracefully on her shoulder. She moves with the kind of quiet dignity that comes from knowing your days are dedicated to ritual and devotion. Historians still argue whether priestesses like Io were based on real individuals or entirely mythological archetypes, but the idea of a mortal woman so closely tied to the divine feels timeless. Today, Io offers flowers at Hera's altar, whispering prayers for the safety of her village. She doesn't yet know that her very existence has become the centerpiece of Zeus's latest misadventure. You can almost feel the weight of the narrative pressing down, as if every step she takes is already mapped out by the unseen hands of fate. A few modern scholars have compared Io's story to an ancient tragedy with comedic undertones, where the punchline is usually something like, "Oops, you've been turned into a farm animal." Meanwhile, up on Olympus, Zeus lounges on a throne of polished gold, but his thoughts are far away, drifting down to the mortal plains where Io walks. There's something about her, maybe her quiet determination, or perhaps just the way nymphs seem to glow under sunlight like someone turned on a divine Instagram filter. Whatever it is, Zeus is captivated. He's plotting as he always does, with a kind of determination that makes you wonder how he ever finds time to manage actual weather. You, as a fly-on-the-wall observer, can see trouble coming from a mile away. It's like watching someone ignore a "do not enter" sign because they think it's a suggestion. Zeus, with his booming laugh and reputation for impulsiveness, is once again on a collision course with Hera's wrath. You'd think, after centuries of divine matrimony, he'd learn to tread carefully. Spoiler alert, he hasn't. Io, blissfully unaware, continues her day. She adjusts the garland around the temple's doorway, humming a tune that might have been popular among shepherds and farmers thousands of years ago. There's a charm in these quiet details. The feel of smooth marble under her fingertips, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the distant bleating of goats on the hillside. It's almost enough to make you forget that the gods are watching, and not always in a benevolent way. As twilight approaches, Io walks through the olive groves, her sandals brushing against the dusty earth. You can smell the mix of resin, wild thyme, and the faint tang of the sea breeze. The stars begin to prick the sky, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. It's a perfectly ordinary scene, the kind of peaceful evening that makes you want to lie down and watch the constellations. If only Zeus could leave it alone. But of course, he can't. Up in the clouds, you catch a flicker of lightning, just a small one, like the universe is giving a subtle wink. The god of thunder is on the move, and you have the uneasy sense that Io's quiet life is about to get very complicated. And honestly, if you were in her sandals, you'd probably start running the other way. There's something almost ironic in all this. Io's loyalty to Hera should have been her shield, but instead, it paints a target on her back. Zeus is known for his charm, if you can call turning into animals to woo mortals charming, and tonight, that charm is focused entirely on Io. The ancient storytellers must have laughed about this around their fires, sipping wine and shaking their heads. Well, here we go again. Someone's getting turned into something weird. You sigh softly, knowing the pattern all too well. It always starts like this: a curious god, an unsuspecting mortal, and a queen with a grudge sharper than any bronze blade. You drift further into the evening air, and suddenly the scene shifts back up to Olympus, where the kind of gossip that fuels half of Greek mythology is already swirling like smoke around the throne room. The gods are lounging on their cloud-soft seats, sipping wine that never runs dry, and they're talking. Oh, they are always talking. It's not the polite kind of chatter you'd hear in a modern-day coffee shop. No, this is the kind of sharp, whispered gossip that can ruin reputations and, occasionally, launch entire wars. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes here without someone turning you into a story about that mortal who sneezed in front of Hera. From your vantage point, you can almost see Hermes leaning casually against a column, grinning like someone who knows all the punchlines before they're told. He's whispering to Apollo, who's pretending to polish his golden lyre, but is very much eavesdropping on every conversation. Zeus is at it again, Hermes says with the kind of gleeful tone usually reserved for announcing free cake. Apollo just smirks, as if to say, of course he is, when is he not? The gossip spreads quickly. Even Artemis rolls her eyes from across the hall, muttering something about how this is exactly why she prefers the company of wild animals over humans and gods alike. There's a sense of inevitability in the air, as though everyone knows that once Zeus gets that look in his eye, no mortal's peaceful life is safe. Historians still argue whether these stories of divine mischief were just ways to explain natural disasters or moral lessons dressed in gossip, but either way, they're dripping with drama. Meanwhile, you catch Hera's gaze sweeping the room like a hunting hawk. She's not just listening, she's calculating. You can almost hear the unspoken words. Which nymph is it this time? Which unfortunate girl is about to have her life flipped upside down because my husband can't resist meddling? Her fingers drum lightly on the armrest of her throne, each tap like the countdown to an inevitable storm. You glance back at Hermes, who's now leaning closer to Dionysus, the god of wine, who, let's be honest, is mostly here for the entertainment value. Io, Hermes whispers, the priestess of Hera. You'd think he'd have the sense to pick someone less problematic. Dionysus chuckles into his goblet, wine spilling slightly down his chin. Oh, this is going to be good, he murmurs, as if settling in for a play. The room itself seems to react. The marble pillars glow faintly under torchlight, casting tall shadows that look almost alive. Even the air feels heavier, thick with anticipation. You can hear the faint clink of jewelry as goddesses shift in their seats, pretending to be above all this, but secretly thrilled to have something new to whisper about. It's like watching a divine reality show unfold in real time. And yet, down on Earth, Io has no clue. She's finishing her prayers under the stars, completely unaware that her name is being tossed around like a ball at a child's festival. If you could warn her, you would, hey, maybe stay indoors tonight, skip the olive grove stroll. But mythology doesn't work that way. Mortals rarely get to dodge their fates, especially when the gods are busy writing the script. There's a strange comfort in knowing that even the mightiest of beings can't resist gossip. It's an ancient habit, after all. Scholars have pointed out that Greek myths are packed with this kind of storytelling because it reflects real human nature, the desire to talk, to speculate, to pass on stories of who did what, with whom. Even in the clouds, it seems, everyone needs a little drama to spice up immortality. A streak of lightning flickers through the sky outside, and you can feel Zeus's energy building. He's not even trying to hide his interest in Io anymore. Hera notices. Oh, she definitely notices. You can practically hear her icy voice, sharp enough to slice through marble. I see him smiling again, and this time, it's not at me. You shift slightly, feeling like an intruder in a very private argument that hasn't even started yet. The gods continue their quiet speculation, each one secretly delighted that for once, the chaos isn't their problem yet. You can almost taste the tension now, like the air before a thunderstorm. Hera is no stranger to Zeus's wandering attention. She's lived through centuries of his antics. Mortals turned into trees, golden rain falling into maidens' laps, swan disguises, and other schemes so bizarre that modern historians still argue whether these tales were meant to be moral warnings or just proof that the gods were the original soap opera stars. But this time, there's a sharper edge to her silence. It's Io, a priestess, who serves her. That makes it personal. You picture Hera seated on her ivory throne, her golden crown gleaming faintly in the torchlight. Her posture is flawless, not a single muscle betraying the slow boil of jealousy simmering beneath her regal exterior. Hera isn't the type to shout. No, she's the kind who plans, the kind who lets her fury marinate until it's sharp enough to cut down anyone who dares cross her. You'd think Zeus would know better by now, but apparently, even the king of the gods is terrible at learning from his own mistakes. Zeus steps back, examining his handiwork with a mix of pride and panic. The transformation is flawless. Io is now the picture of bovine elegance. Her coat gleams white as polished marble. Her breath puffs gently into the night air. If this were a festival, she'd be the kind of cow people would paint gold leaf on and parade through the streets. The ancient Greeks loved their ceremonial cattle, after all, and historians still argue whether such animals symbolized divine purity or just a very expensive form of sacrifice. Hera, however, isn't fooled. She can sense something is off, like a mother who knows her child is lying about homework just by the way they're holding their pencil. She descends from Olympus with that regal, unhurried grace that makes even Zeus nervous. Her presence is like a drop in temperature, the kind that makes everyone want to suddenly look busy. Oh, what a lovely cow, Hera says, her voice smooth as honey, but sharp enough to cut through the thick night air. You can almost see Zeus flinch. Where did this beautiful creature come from? She asks, tilting her head ever so slightly, the golden pins in her hair catching the starlight. Zeus, master of excuses and awkward laughter, stammers something about finding the cow wandering near a meadow. Thought it would make a fine gift for the temple, he says, which is the divine equivalent of a bad cover story. If Hera had an eyebrow emoji, it would be permanently raised at this point. You feel a pang of sympathy for Io, who stands there silently, unable to speak, her eyes pleading with anyone to realize she's not just some random piece of livestock. Imagine being trapped in that body, wanting to scream, "It's me, I'm still here," but all that comes out is a plaintive moo. There's a fringe theory among classicists that stories like Eo's were metaphors for women losing their voices in patriarchal structures, but maybe it's just that turning into a cow is weirdly humiliating and therefore unforgettable. Hera smiles, but it's not the kind of smile that warms your heart. It's the kind that makes you think, oh, this is going to end badly for someone. Well, she says, if it's such a fine cow, I'd like it as a gift. You can practically see the color drain from Zeus's face, not an easy feat for someone made of thunder and divine fire. Reluctantly, Zeus agrees. It's not like he can say no to Hera without sparking an argument that might level half of Greece. So he nods, mutters something about, "Of course, dear," and steps back as Hera places a delicate hand on Io's back. The poor nymph shivers beneath the touch, her ears flicking nervously. "Such a gentle creature," Hera says, her tone dripping with something that isn't exactly affection. And you realize, in that moment, that Io is no longer just a victim of Zeus's impulsive schemes. She's now caught in Hera's game, and the queen of the gods is far less forgiving than her husband. The air feels heavy with unspoken tension. Even the stars seem to dim, as though they'd rather not witness what's coming next. Io lowers her head, trying to stay calm, but you can almost sense her desperation. She's a goddess's handmaiden turned pawn, standing quietly in the cold night as two immortals silently battle over pride and betrayal. You can't help but wonder what the ancient Greeks thought when they first heard this story. Was it cautionary? Was it supposed to make people laugh nervously around the fire? Or was it just another reminder that when gods get involved in mortal lives, things rarely end well? Either way, Io's fate has been sealed, and Hera, with that deceptively serene smile, is already planning her next move. You sense the shift immediately. Hera's fingers brush against Io's snowy flank, and though her touch is light, there's a weight to it like a signature on a contract Io never wanted to sign. Hera smiles sweetly at Zeus, the kind of smile that could freeze boiling water. "Thank you, my dear husband," she says, her voice calm, almost melodic. "This cow will make a lovely addition to my care." And just like that, Io belongs to Hera, not as a priestess anymore, but as a prize or perhaps a warning. Zeus forces a laugh, one of those hollow chuckles that say, "I'm definitely not panicking inside." He doesn't dare argue. Hera's tone might be polite, but you can feel the storm clouds gathering in her words. And honestly, what can he do? Admit that the cow is actually a woman he was moments away from flirting with? Not unless he wants to spend the next century sleeping under a rock. Io, poor Io, looks between them with wide, terrified eyes. Her soft muzzle trembles, and her ears flick nervously. She can't speak, can't plead, can't explain. All she can do is stand there, mute and helpless. The myths tell us that Hera's jealousy could be merciless, and standing in the goddess' presence you understand why. She doesn't need to shout or rage. Her silence, her calm control, is far more unsettling. The gods of Olympus know better than to interfere. Hermes leans casually against a pillar, pretending to be fascinated by a nearby vine of ivy, but you can tell he's watching everything with a kind of grin that says, "This is about to get interesting." Apollo tunes his lyre softly, as though setting background music for the unfolding drama. Even Athena, ever wise and stoic, raises an eyebrow not in judgment, but in quiet curiosity. Historians still argue whether these divine scenes were metaphors for human relationships or simply stories meant to remind mortals that the gods were as flawed and emotional as they were. "Such a fine creature," Hera repeats, running a hand along Io's neck. "I'll take good care of her." And by good care, you know she means something closer to constant surveillance and a lifetime of misery. There's a kind of calculated cruelty in her gaze. Not because she hates Io is just a pawn, but because she knows this will hurt Zeus. Zeus tries to protest, but the words die on his lips. He can't reveal Io's true identity without exposing himself, and Hera is counting on that. It's like watching someone trapped in their own lie, unable to back out without making things worse. You almost want to shout, just tell her the truth. But let's be real, this is Zeus. Truth isn't really his strong suit. With a flick of her wrist, Hera calls for attendants. Two ethereal beings, their forms shimmering like moonlight, step forward to guide Io away. You can almost hear the soft clinking of their bracelets, the whisper of silk robes brushing over marble floors. Io digs her hooves into the ground, reluctant, but she's powerless. Hera's will is absolute here. You watch as they lead Io down the steps of Olympus, through a path lined with golden laurels and glowing torches. The night air is cool and sharp, filled with the scent of cedar and smoke. Io glances back once, her large eyes shimmering with confusion, and for a heartbeat you think Zeus might intervene. But he doesn't. He just stands there, jaw tight, thunder simmering in his chest. It's almost tragic, in a way. Io's life, once so simple, has been rewritten in a single night. No longer a priestess of Hera, she is now a gift, a trophy caught between a god's weakness and a goddess's vengeance. You imagine her thoughts, if she could still think like a woman. What did I do to deserve this? Some scholars have pointed out that Io's story was often told as a cautionary tale, a reminder of how mortals who cross paths with the gods rarely come away unscathed. But in this moment, you don't see caution, you see raw unfairness, as if the universe has decided that beauty and devotion are punishable crimes. The last thing you hear as Io disappears into the shadows is the soft, almost mocking sound of Hera's voice. Sleep well, my lovely cow. And you know, deep down, that Io's ordeal has only just begun. You trail after Io in your mind's eye, the soft clop of her hooves echoing down a stone path that glimmers faintly under moonlight. Hera doesn't waste time. As soon as she has possession of this gift, she assigns a guardian, not just any guardian, but Argus Panoptes, the hundred-eyed sentinel. Imagine a watchman so thorough that even when half of his eyes are closed, the others are still wide awake, scanning for trouble. Ancient poets loved this character. He's like the mythological version of a security camera that never needs batteries. Argus arrives silently, his form both human and otherworldly. You see him standing tall, every eye on his body blinking in some strange, unnerving rhythm, like a field of stars caught in a breeze. Io stares at him, or perhaps at 20 of his eyes at once, and shudders. She doesn't know his name, but she can feel his power. This isn't a guardian who takes coffee breaks. This is someone who will watch her every second of every day. Hera's instructions are simple. Do not let her escape. Her tone leaves no room for interpretation. It's not about protecting the cow. Of course, it's about ensuring Zeus can't sneak back in to undo what's been done. Hera's jealousy is like a shadow that stretches into every corner of this story, and now Argus is her instrument of control. The meadow where Io is kept is serene in that deceptively perfect way. You can almost smell the wildflowers, lavender, chamomile, and sweet clover mingling with the sharp scent of olive leaves. It would be a peaceful place, if not for the fact that Io is pacing nervously in circles, her hooves kicking up dust. The gods watch from a distance, some amused, some indifferent, while mortals below remain oblivious. Historians still debate whether Argus represents constant vigilance or oppressive power, maybe both. Argus, to his credit, isn't cruel, he just is. He sits on a rock nearby, his upper eyes scanning the horizon, while the lower ones follow Io's every move. Even when he blinks, there's no relief. It's like being monitored by an army of silent, glowing lanterns. At night, his eyes catch the starlight, reflecting it back like tiny mirrors, and you can almost see Io's fear mirrored in those endless pupils. Zeus, of course, is furious. Not that he would admit it out loud. Doing so would give Hera the satisfaction of knowing her plan is working. But he can't stand the thought of Io being trapped like this, wandering the same patch of grass with 100 pairs of eyes watching her every twitch. If you listen closely, you can almost hear him grumbling in the clouds, the rumble of distant thunder betraying his frustration. The ancient storytellers say Argus was nearly impossible to outwit, which is probably why Hera trusted him with such a delicate task. His legend is older than this myth. Some say he was born from the earth itself, a creature meant to observe and endure. There's even a theory among myth scholars that Argus's many eyes symbolize the ever-present watchfulness of the gods over mortal lives. If that's true, Io must have felt the full weight of divine scrutiny pressing down on her every moment. You picture the scene, the soft chirp of crickets in the background, the pale moon casting long shadows over the meadow, and Io lying down reluctantly, her body curled awkwardly on the grass. Argus doesn't sleep. He just shifts slightly, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark like embers. If this were a modern story, someone might call it overkill, but when Hera sets her mind to something, subtlety isn't always the goal. Somewhere far above, Zeus paces again, lightning sparking faintly at his fingertips. He knows he can't confront Hera directly, that would only make things worse for Io. Instead, he's thinking, planning. And if you know anything about Zeus, you know that when he wants something, he doesn't give up easily. Hermes, watching the whole mess unfold from a nearby cloud, smirks like someone who knows he'll be called in to fix things sooner rather than later. The night grows colder, the stars sharper against the black sky. You imagine Io glancing upward, wondering if anyone will help her, or if she's destined to spend her days as a silent, grazing creature under the endless gaze of Argus. The tragedy of it all is almost soft around the edges, like a lullaby sung in a minor key. The days roll by like a slow, unwinding scroll, each one blending into the next for poor Io. Morning brings the same scene dew on the grass, the hum of bees darting through wildflowers, and Argus sitting nearby like a living statue, his 100 eyes glinting in the sun. You can almost feel the weight of his gaze pressing down on her, every movement scrutinized, every attempt at freedom cut short before it begins. It's enough to make anyone feel trapped, but for Io, the confinement is unbearable. She isn't just a cow, she's a mind still human, still yearning for the temple steps where she once offered garlands to Hera. Imagine the confusion of being locked in an alien body, forced to graze on grass when your hands used to shape wreaths of flowers. Her hooves sink into soft earth, and though the meadow is beautiful, it feels like a prison. Ancient poets often described her loneliness, her soft, mournful cries under the moonlight. Some even compared her voice to a song that could break hearts, a reminder of the human soul trapped inside an animal form. Nightfall doesn't bring relief. If anything, the stars above seem to mock her. They twinkle and shimmer like they're whispering secrets to each other, as if they know her fate better than she does. The moon rises, bathing the meadow in a silver glow. Io lies down among the clover, her breath warm against the cool ground, and she closes her eyes, but not for long. Argus never lets her out of his sight. When half his eyes close to rest, the other half stay open, glowing faintly like embers in the dark. There's something oddly unsettling about Argus's quiet watchfulness. He isn't cruel, he doesn't taunt her, he simply observes, like a sentinel who has forgotten how to blink properly. Historians still argue whether Argus was meant to symbolize relentless duty or an oppressive kind of loyalty. Either way, Io feels his presence like a shadow she can never shake. You can almost hear the quiet sounds of the meadow, the rustle of leaves, the soft chorus of crickets, and the occasional flutter of an owl's wings overhead. In another life, this place might feel peaceful. But for Io, each sound is a reminder of what she's lost. Her voice, her freedom, her very self. You can almost feel her longing as she stares at the horizon, wishing for a day when she can run as a woman again, not a beast. Zeus watches from afar, guilt gnawing at him like a persistent storm on the horizon. He's good at creating problems, solving them, not so much. But even he can't bear to see Io suffer like this. Hera's strategy is working perfectly, with Io under Argus's watchful eyes. Zeus has no chance to approach her. Every move he makes is countered before it begins. Hera's calm vengeance is like a chess game, and right now, she's several moves ahead. One evening, as the sun dips below the hills and the sky burns with shades of orange and purple, Io lets out a low, mournful sound. It's not quite a human cry, but it carries the same emotion, a plea for release, for someone to remember that she was once more than this. It's the kind of sound that sticks with you, like a fragment of music you can't quite forget. You find yourself imagining what the villagers might think if they stumbled upon this meadow. To them, Io would just be a remarkable white cow, a creature too beautiful and serene to be ordinary. Some scholars have suggested that such myths grew from actual sacred animals worshipped in ancient temples. Perhaps Io's story was inspired by the way mortals once looked into the eyes of these animals and saw something deeply human staring back. The meadow grows dark, and the stars seem closer now, sharp and unblinking. Argus doesn't move. He just watches, his many eyes reflecting starlight, making him look less like a guardian and more like a living constellation. Io shifts uneasily, and for a brief moment, you wonder if even the grass beneath her feels her sorrow. The gods, as always, can't resist meddling. One day, Hermes steps forward with a mischievous grin, summoned not by Hera but by Zeus. You can picture him strolling into the divine courtyard, his winged sandals barely whispering against the floor, as if even gravity knows better than to weigh him down. Hermes is the god of clever solutions, smooth talking, and stealing things when nobody's looking, the kind of person you'd want on your trivia team but never leave alone with your wallet. Zeus, desperate to free Io, calls on him like a man calling in a favor from an old friend who just happens to be really, really good at trickery. Hermes listens to Zeus's plan, which, honestly, is more of a plea at this point, and tilts his head, smirking. "You got yourself into this mess," he seems to say with his eyes. "But fine, I'll help." Historians still argue whether Hermes' role in myths like this is to act as a loyal servant of Zeus, or simply a chaos-loving opportunist who can't resist a challenge. Either way, he's intrigued by the idea of outsmarting Argus Panoptis, the hundred-eyed watchman. Argus, for his part, is impossible to bribe. He doesn't sleep fully, and he doesn't get distracted easily. But Hermes knows every guard has a weakness. It's not always gold or flattery. Sometimes it's boredom, that slow creeping dullness that settles in after days of watching the same patch of grass and listening to the same cow noises. Hermes decides to weaponize that boredom with something far more powerful than a sword: music. You see Hermes arrive at the meadow one twilight, disguised as a humble shepherd. He carries a rustic flute, its surface worn smooth from years of use, or at least that's what it looks like. In truth, it's freshly conjured, humming with divine magic. Argus watches him warily, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" those 100 eyes seem to ask. Hermes, with a smile that could charm even the most suspicious sentinel, says, "Just a traveler. Mind if I sit for a while and play you a tune?" Io lifts her head, curious. She recognizes something familiar in the shepherd's easy grace. Maybe it's the glimmer of godhood just beneath the disguise, or maybe she's simply starved for anything that breaks the monotony of Argus's eternal staring. Hermes begins to play, and the sound drifts across the meadow like warm honey. It's soft, soothing, with a rhythm that seems to mimic the pulse of the earth itself. At first, Argus resists. He shifts on his rock, his top eyes watching Hermes while the bottom ones keep a steady gaze on Io. But the melody is persistent, winding its way into his thoughts, nudging aside the weight of duty. You can almost see his posture soften, his shoulders relax. Some of his eyes close for a moment, just one or two, but it's enough to make you hold your breath. Hermes doesn't stop. He plays on, the music lilting and hypnotic. The ancient poets loved this image, a god using nothing but art and patience to topple an impenetrable guard. Some scholars argue that this scene is a metaphor for the power of music over brute force, the way creativity can unravel even the tightest grip of control. Others think it's just another example of Hermes being cheeky, and honestly, they might be right. As the song goes on, Argus's eyelids grow heavier. One by one, his eyes close, like tiny lanterns being snuffed out in the dark. Io watches in awe, her heart pounding. She can sense that something is happening, something good. Hermes's flute sings on, weaving a lullaby so sweet that even the relentless Argus cannot resist its pull. Finally, all 100 eyes close. Argus's head tilts forward slightly, and for the first time, in what feels like centuries, he sleeps. It's not a peaceful sleep, more like the heavy, dreamless kind that comes after a long watch, but it's enough. Hermes lowers the flute, glancing toward Io with a conspiratorial wink. "Time to get you out of here," he seems to say. In that moment, the meadow feels alive. The stars glitter brighter, as though approving this daring rescue. Somewhere in the distance, the wind rustles the olive branches like applause. Io steps forward, trembling, unsure whether to trust her savior, but Hermes gestures gently, reassuring her with calm confidence. You hold your breath as Hermes makes his move. Argus is slumped forward on his rock, every one of his 100 eyes shut tight, lulled into a deep, unnatural sleep by the magic of Hermes' flute. The meadow is eerily quiet. The crickets have paused their song, as if even they're watching this moment unfold. Io steps cautiously, her hooves making the faintest thuds against the ground. She glances at Hermes, eyes wide with a silent plea, like a prisoner tasting freedom for the first time. Hermes, ever the trickster, leans in close and whispers to her, though she can't fully understand his words in her current form. "You're safe now," he murmurs. "Let's get you out of here before Hera notices." He gently strokes her head, and for a moment, Io relaxes. There's a warmth in Hermes' presence, a lightness that feels like hope. It's the kind of moment that makes you realize why ancient Greeks adored stories of the gods, because they weren't just powerful, they were unpredictable, flawed, and occasionally wonderfully kind. But Hermes knows this rescue isn't as simple as walking away. Argus may be asleep, but Hera's wrath is never far behind. He pulls a small, gleaming dagger from his belt, not a weapon of war, but a blade of divine craftsmanship designed for precision. The poets say Hermes ended Argus while he slept, freeing Io from his gaze. Scholars still argue about whether this act was heroic or cruel after all. Argus was only following orders. Some say the story symbolizes the triumph of wit over brute vigilance, while others insist it's just another example of divine politics gone wrong. You see Hermes hesitate for just a second, his expression flickering between determination and regret. Then, with a swift, almost merciful motion, he strikes. Argus doesn't wake. His many eyes close for the last time, their faint glow fading into darkness. The meadow grows still again, as if holding its breath. Hermes kneels, perhaps in respect, and whispers, "May your watch be over." Io watches, her ears flicking nervously, unsure what's happening. She doesn't know that her captor is gone, only that the oppressive weight of constant surveillance has lifted. It's like stepping out of a shadow into sunlight. Hermes turns to her and smiles, the kind of smile that says, "You're free now for real this time." "Come on," Hermes says, motioning for her to follow. Io steps forward cautiously, her hooves sinking into the soft grass. She's not used to freedom anymore. Every sound, a rustling leaf, a distant owl, makes her flinch. But Hermes moves with such calm confidence that she finds herself trusting him. You can almost feel her hope building, timid but growing, like the first sprout of a flower after winter. Up on Olympus, though, Hera feels it, the subtle shift in the air, the loss of her watchful sentinel. Her fury is instant, like a gust of wind slamming open a door. "He's gone," she murmurs, eyes narrowing, "and I know who's behind this." Her gaze turns upward, as if she can see Zeus smirking in the distance, already plotting how to keep Io safe. You can almost hear Hera's voice like ice cracking. This isn't over. Hermes, meanwhile, leads Io away from the meadow, through winding paths under the moonlight. The night is cool and quiet, the stars shimmering overhead as if cheering them on. You imagine the sound of her hooves crunching softly on dry earth, the faint jingling of Hermes' charms, the distant whisper of olive leaves in the breeze. Io moves like someone half afraid she'll wake up to find this was all just a dream. There's something profoundly human about this moment. Io's story, like so many Greek myths, is about suffering and resilience, about how even when the odds are stacked against you, there's always a glimmer of hope. A trickster with a flute, ready to outwit the impossible. It's a reminder that cleverness can win battles that strength cannot. For a fleeting moment, Io gazes up at the moon, and in her dark eyes, you can almost see her former self, the priestess who once offered prayers under this same sky. The night air wraps around her like a comforting cloak, and for the first time since her transformation, she dares to believe she might be free. The freedom is short-lived. Hera, upon realizing what has happened, doesn't rage with fire or thunder that's Zeus's style. Her fury is quiet and cold, the kind that settles into every corner of a room and makes the walls feel like they're listening. "So, he sent Hermes," she mutters to herself, her lips curling into a smile that isn't a smile at all. You can almost hear the unspoken words. If Zeus thinks he can outwit me, he's sorely mistaken. Hera always has another move. While Io and Hermes make their way through the shadowed paths of the mortal world, Hera crafts her next punishment, not for Zeus directly, but for Io, the unfortunate bystander in all this divine drama. Hera sends down a creature so small and unassuming that it almost feels like a joke, a gadfly. But this isn't just any ordinary fly. This is a divine instrument of torment, designed to make Io's life a misery from sunup to sundown. You can picture it, Io standing in a quiet meadow, her white coat shimmering under the morning sun. For a moment, everything feels calm, and then buzz. It's faint at first, a tiny sound that might not bother you if you were just a regular cow. But Io isn't just a cow. She's a human mind trapped in a body that's already foreign and awkward. And now she has this relentless, stinging gadfly dive-bombing her, biting at her ears, her back, her soft muzzle. There's no escape. She shakes her head violently, but it's no use. Hera's messenger is persistent, cruel in its simplicity. Io bolts. Her hooves kick up dust as she runs from the invisible enemy, her breath coming in frantic bursts. The once beautiful meadow, filled with flowers and morning light, becomes a cage of buzzing torment. It's almost painful to watch. You can feel her frustration, her helplessness, as if every sting is a reminder that freedom from Argus was only an illusion. Hera's jealousy doesn't fade, it adapts. Hermes watches, powerless to help now. His role was to outsmart Argus, and he succeeded, but this is different. This isn't a puzzle to solve or a lock to pick. This is Hera's cruelty on full display, and even the cleverest god knows better than to interfere with the queen's vengeance twice in the same week. He looks at Io with sympathy, but sympathy won't drive away the sting. The ancient storytellers made much of this part of Io's tale, her endless running, her restless wandering. Some said the gadfly drove her across continents, forcing her to swim rivers, climb hills, and cross valleys that mortals had never dared to travel. Historians still debate whether these journeys were symbolic of the spread of culture and trade, or if they were simply metaphors for suffering and resilience. Either way, you can almost see her frantic path stretching across the map of ancient Greece. Io's cries echo across the countryside. To mortals, it's just the sound of a distressed cow, but if you listen closely, you can hear the faint echo of a human voice in it, a desperate, wordless plea. Her eyes roll with fear as the gadfly circles her head like a living curse. You can almost feel the sting on your own skin, sharp and relentless, the kind of irritation that gets under your bones. Above it all, Hera watches, calm and unyielding. She doesn't need to chase Io herself. The gadfly is enough a reminder that her will extends beyond Olympus, beyond the mortal world, down to the very grass Io runs across. There's a chilling efficiency to it, as though Hera's saying, "You cannot hide from me no matter where you go." And so Io runs, through fields of wheat, past villages where farmers stare in confusion at the sight of a frantic white cow bolting through their gardens. She doesn't stop. She can't. It's as though every sting drives her forward, her hooves pounding against the earth like a heartbeat. You can almost taste the dust kicked up in her wake, feel the heat of the sun beating down as she races toward the unknown. For Io, there is no peace now, only flight, only the desperate hope that somewhere, beyond the horizon, this torment might finally end. You follow Io's frantic journey, a blur of white against the rugged landscapes of ancient Greece. Her hooves drum against the earth like war drums, her breath coming in ragged bursts as the relentless gadfly buzzes around her, biting and stinging without pause. Every sting pushes her forward, as though Hera herself is nudging her along, forcing her to wander endlessly across land and sea. It's a cruel sort of exile, one without walls or chains, but with no freedom either. The terrain changes under her hooves. First, she barrels through olive groves, the sharp scent of crushed leaves mingling with the dust of dry soil. Then she climbs rocky hillsides where goats pause to watch her with wide, curious eyes. The wind whips against her white coat, carrying with it the smell of the Aegean salt, brine, and the distant promise of waves. Io doesn't have the luxury of stopping to enjoy the view. Every step is driven by pain and fear. You can almost hear her panting, her hooves slipping slightly on the rough stones, but she doesn't slow down. Some versions of the myth claim Io crossed continents during her flight, wandering as far as Egypt. Historians still debate whether this detail was meant to connect Greek mythology with foreign lands, blending cultures into one sweeping story. Whatever the reason, you can see the symbolic journey unfolding Io's path, carving an invisible thread across the ancient world, tying distant places together with her suffering. The sun beats down relentlessly, turning the earth beneath her hooves hot enough to sting. She wades through shallow rivers to cool her legs, but even there, the gadfly finds her, darting and buzzing like a tiny spear of vengeance. Her reflection in the water startles her, the soft, sorrowful eyes of a cow staring back, but somewhere inside those eyes, the flicker of a woman's spirit still burns. She lowers her head, as if ashamed, then surges forward again, splashing through reeds and mud. In the villages she passes, mortals stop and stare. "Did you see that?" they murmur, pointing at the unusual cow that seems both majestic and wild-eyed. A few drop their baskets of figs or grain in shock, convinced they've glimpsed something divine. Ancient Greeks believed in omens, after all, and a frantic white cow with tears in its eyes would surely count as one. You imagine the whispers spreading like wildfire. A sacred creature, touched by the gods, has run through our fields. As night falls, Io collapses briefly near a grove of cypress trees, the cool shadow a small relief against the day's heat. You can almost feel her trembling, her breath heavy and uneven. For a moment, the gadfly quiets, as if savoring her exhaustion. The stars above look like cold sparks, distant and unfeeling, though perhaps some constellation is watching over her. The Greeks love to weave suffering into the stars, after all a reminder that the heavens are just as full of stories as the earth below. Zeus watches from a distance, his jaw tight with guilt. He can't openly intervene without drawing Hera's attention, but his anger grows like a storm waiting to break. It's ironic, isn't it? The king of gods, master of lightning and sky, brought low by his inability to protect the very woman his actions doomed. You wonder if Io, in her exhausted mind, senses his presence above her, like a silent apology carried on the wind. And still, the journey continues. With dawn, the gadfly returns, buzzing like an angry drumbeat, and Io rises, shaky but determined. Across fields, through valleys, past shrines and temples, she runs. Her suffering becomes a legend, whispered among shepherds and fishermen. They say the white cow is not a cow at all, but a cursed maiden, chased by unseen forces. Whether they believe it or not, the story sticks. Myths have a way of doing that. Io's hooves strike the edge of the sea, and for a heartbeat, she hesitates. The water glitters with early sunlight, waves lapping gently at the shore. She steps in, and the coolness soothes her, but the gadfly follows, biting even as she wades deeper. Desperate, she crosses the narrow strait, the one that would one day be called the Bosporus, and emerges on the other side, dripping and exhausted, her breath steaming in the chill morning air. This crossing, the poets say, gave the strait its name, Bosporus, the cow's passage. It's a cruel kind of fame, but it's all Io has for now. You follow Io's journey beyond the Bosporus, the cool sea breeze still clinging to her damp coat. Each step she takes is heavy, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of a destiny she never asked for. The land here feels foreign, the grass is sharper, the air tinged with unfamiliar scents of strange flowers and spices drifting from distant villages. Yet Io pushes forward, driven by both fear and a faint, stubborn hope that somewhere this torment must end. The gadfly doesn't let up. It darts and buzzes, stinging her flanks with merciless precision. You can almost feel the sting yourself, that sharp, needling pain that sends her running faster than she thought possible. The ancient storytellers might have meant this as a metaphor, pain forcing us to move, to grow, to seek freedom, but for Io, it's just suffering. Her hooves bleed slightly from the rough ground, and the dust clings to her once pristine coat, turning her white fur a shade of weary gray. Through hills and valleys, Io wanders, until she reaches lands so distant that the language of the people sounds like a song she doesn't know the words to. Farmers glance up from their fields, eyes wide, as this strange, wild-eyed cow barrels past. Some bow, thinking she must be a sacred omen, while others whisper to each other, spinning stories that will be told for generations. Historians still argue whether these tales were simply ways to connect local myths with the great Greek epics, but the image of a white cow on a desperate journey is one that lingers. Zeus watches from the clouds, his frustration building like a summer storm. He knows he cannot confront Hera directly, that would only make Io's plight worse, but he can't stand by forever. His lightning crackles faintly in the distance, a silent promise that he hasn't forgotten her. He's waiting for the right moment, the right stroke of divine luck, to set things right. In the midst of Io's suffering, a strange thing happens. She begins to find her own strength. It's subtle at first, a moment of stillness between bites of the gadfly, where she realizes she can endure the pain. She can keep moving, keep surviving. There's a kind of resilience in her now, a quiet determination that feels almost heroic. You can imagine her thinking, if I must be a cow, then I will be a cow who refuses to break. The journey takes her to a wide river, the Nile. Its waters glitter under the blazing sun, and the air hums with life. Papyrus reeds sway gently in the current, and birds skim the surface of the water. Io steps into the river cautiously, the coolness a relief against her sore legs. The Nile's banks are lined with temples and carvings, and though she doesn't understand their meaning, she senses something sacred here, something older than the Olympian gods themselves. The myths say that it's here, in Egypt, that Io's story shifts. Zeus, unable to bear her suffering any longer, calls upon the fates themselves to intervene. Some versions claim he begs Hera for mercy, promising never to pursue Io again. Others suggest that Hera, satisfied with Io's misery, finally relents just enough to let the curse lift. Scholars still debate which version is closer to the truth of the myth, but either way, Egypt becomes the place of transformation and redemption. As Io drinks from the Nile, the gadfly finally retreats, buzzing off as if its mission is complete. The air is suddenly still, and Io looks up at the sky, confused by the silence. It's as if someone has lifted a veil from her mind. She feels a warmth spread through her body, a divine presence, gentle but firm. You can almost see the light gathering around her, wrapping her in gold. Zeus descends quietly, for once, leaving behind the pomp and thunder. His expression is somber, tinged with guilt. "I'm sorry," he whispers, a rare admission for a god who rarely apologizes. He touches her forehead, and the magic flows. Io's form shifts, her limbs lengthening, her hooves dissolving into soft human hands. The white fur falls away, replaced by skin kissed by sunlight. She gasps, her voice returning in a broken, trembling sound. The first thing she says is simply, "Why?" It's a question Zeus doesn't answer. Maybe he can't. Maybe the gods themselves don't have good answers for the suffering they cause. All he can do is promise her safety, here in this foreign land, where no gadflies or jealous queens can reach her. The sun sets over the Nile, casting a crimson glow on the water. Io kneels at the riverbank, touching her reflection, her own face again, her own eyes staring back. There's a bitter sweetness to it, because she knows she'll never be the same. Suffering leaves its marks, even when the scars are invisible. Io stands by the Nile, her breath slowing as the weight of her ordeal begins to lift. The cool river water ripples against her fingers, and she marvels at the sensation of human skin again, a texture so familiar, yet almost forgotten. You can feel her quiet relief, but also the lingering echo of everything she's endured. The endless running, the sting of Hera's gadfly, the silent, watchful eyes of Argus. Freedom feels strange, like waking from a nightmare only to find that the memory of it lingers in the corners of your mind. Zeus hovers nearby, his expression uncharacteristically subdued. He knows this isn't a moment for celebration. He caused this not intentionally, perhaps, but through his recklessness, his inability to resist the thrill of mortal beauty. For once, he doesn't try to charm his way out of guilt. He simply promises Io that she will never again be tormented for his mistakes. You can almost hear him murmuring apologies, though the words sound clumsy in the mouth of the king of gods. Hera's anger, for now, has cooled. Some myths say she allows Io to return to a semblance of peace, satisfied that the nymph has suffered enough to make Zeus regret his actions. Others suggest that Hera's silence is never forgiveness, just a pause in an eternal game of rivalry. Historians still argue whether Hera's treatment of Io was meant to portray her as cruel or simply as a woman wielding the only power she had in a world ruled by her unfaithful husband. The debate continues, as alive today as it was when the myth was first told by candlelight. In time, Io finds her place in Egypt. The myths tell us she bore a son, Epaphus, who would become a ruler, a bridge between the divine and the mortal. Through him, Io's lineage would intertwine with the heroes of future generations. Perseus, Heracles, and her suffering would ripple through history, shaping the stories that followed. It's as if her pain wasn't meaningless, but part of a larger tapestry the gods themselves can barely comprehend. You picture Io walking along the Nile's edge at dusk, the warm wind lifting her hair, the scent of papyrus and lotus flowers drifting around her. Her heart still aches, but she's no longer running. The stars above seem softer now, less like silent judges and more like companions. Maybe she's thinking about her days as a priestess in Greece, or maybe she's simply savoring the feel of solid earth under her bare feet, free from hooves and fear. There's something oddly comforting about Io's story. It's not just about jealousy or suffering, it's about endurance. She survived. She adapted. And in a world where gods treated mortals like pieces on a game board, she found her way back to herself. You imagine the ancient storytellers leaning closer to the fire, whispering the final lines of her tale to an audience lulled by the sound of crackling wood and the cool night air. The myth of Io isn't about neat, happy endings. It's about resilience, about how, even when life turns you into something unrecognizable, there's always a chance to find your way back. And maybe that's why her story has lasted for centuries, passed down like a secret message hidden inside the stars. As the night deepens, you see Io lying beneath a palm tree, gazing at the sky. The constellations shimmer above her, perhaps even the constellation of Argus, whose eyes Hera scattered across the peacock's tail to honor his watchfulness. The world feels quiet again, at last. And now, as Io's story drifts into the calm silence of the night, you find yourself breathing more slowly, as though her long journey has somehow settled into your own heartbeat. The rushing hooves, the buzzing torment, the frantic flights across fields and rivers, all of it softens now, fading like ripples on the surface of the Nile at dusk. You can almost see the water reflecting a pale, endless sky, where nothing chases you, nothing demands your attention. The breeze that once drove Io forward is now gentle and warm, like the touch of sleep brushing across your skin. The stars above are steady, glowing softly as if whispering a lullaby only you can hear. Maybe they've always been telling stories like this, glowing with the quiet reassurance that no matter how chaotic the world feels, everything eventually finds its stillness. You can imagine lying on the soft grass by that same riverbank, the scent of reeds and lotus flowers surrounding you, the night insects humming their slow, drowsy chorus. The world feels safe here, timeless and distant from all the struggles of the day. You don't need to run anymore. You don't need to think about Hera's wrath or Zeus's mistakes. All that remains is the soft rhythm of your breath and the distant sound of flowing water. Let your mind settle here, with the stars and the river and the quiet hum of night. Let the last flickers of Io's story fade into a warm, silvery haze. You've walked through the storm, through the buzzing chaos, and now you've arrived at this calm place where everything is gentle and slow. It's time to rest.